Book 1. Debts and Acknowledgements. From my grandfather Verus, I received a gentle manner, a quiet temper. From the reputation of my father, not from the man himself, as he died when I was young, from what was said of him, I received modesty and the habit of not showing off. From my mother, I received piety and a simple way of living. She kept herself from doing harm, not only in what she did, but in what she thought. She did not eat much. She did not spend much. She gave what she could to whoever needed it. From my great-grandfather, the lesson that good teachers are worth finding and bringing close, that a man should not be satisfied with whatever learning happens to be near him. From Diognetus, I learned not to be taken in, not to follow every man who claimed to have some special power or hidden knowledge, not to care about raising birds to fight other birds, to be able to hear plain words, even harsh ones, and not to feel insulted by them, to turn toward philosophy early. From Rusticus came the understanding that my character needed work. He did not tell me I was already good. He showed me I was not yet good enough. He taught me to read carefully and not to settle for the surface of a thing, not to agree too quickly, not to be led into argument for the pleasure of arguing. To write in a plain way, no decoration, no reaching for effect. The words should say the thing and nothing more. He gave me his copy of Epictetus. From Apollonius, I received the habit of being free in how I made up my mind, free from the need for reasons to be solid before I could act on them. He showed me how to look at pain directly, how to look at the loss of a child directly, how to stay the same man through a long illness. He was both firm and soft, both decided and open. He was never impatient when he taught. From Sextus, a seriousness that was not performed, a way of caring for the people around him that was quiet and did not call attention to itself. He put up with those who knew nothing of philosophy. He put up with those who formed opinions without thought. He did not make them feel small for it. His praise meant something because he did not give it easily. From Alexander the Grammarian, the practice of not correcting people sharply. When someone used a wrong word, he did not point to the mistake. He simply used the right word himself in the same sentence as if he had not noticed. The correction was made. The person was not shamed. From Fronto, I saw how envy works in men of high position, how craftiness works, how flattery works. These things are not beneath the powerful. In some ways, they run deeper in them. From Maximus, I learned what it looks like to be master of yourself, not to be pulled sideways by anything outside, to carry cheerfulness into illness, into loss, into days when nothing goes right. When he smiled simply. When he was uncertain, he said he was uncertain. He was not hurried, and he was not slow. He was not confused by hard things, and he did not go dark when things were hard. From the man who adopted me as a son, from my father, I received more than from almost anyone, a mildness that did not waver, a steadiness in decisions that had been thought through carefully. No hunger for what people call honor, a love of work that did not need anyone watching, the ability to listen to a man who had something useful to say, even if that man had no standing. He did not go to dinner parties unless he had a reason. He did not love to be seen. He did not need to fill a room. He was content with a few things. He could stop when stopping was right. He could press on when pressing on was right. He had no favorites. Only those who were capable were given difficult things to do. From the gods I have received so much that it would take longer to name it all than to name everything else. Good grandparents, good parents, a sister who did not become my enemy, teachers who did not lead me wrong. Book 2 Among the Quadi on the Gran. Begin each day by saying this to yourself. Today I shall meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, insolent, disloyal, envious, and antisocial. They are this way because they cannot tell good from evil, but I have seen that good is beautiful by nature and evil is ugly by nature, and I have seen that the man who wrongs me is my neighbor, not in blood, not in rank, but in reason, in the same fragment of the divine that we each carry. No one sharing in reason and divinity can do me any real harm. No one can make me base. I cannot feel anger toward my own neighbor. I cannot hate him. We were made for cooperation, as feet, as hands, as the upper and lower rows of teeth. To work against one another is against nature. It is against what we are. This thing that I call myself, what is it? It is flesh. It is breath. It is the part that governs. The flesh, despise it. Blood, bones, a mesh of nerves and veins and arteries. Look at what it is, not what you imagine it to be. The breath, the same air that everything breathes in and breathes out, not yours, passing through you. The governing part, that is the thing to attend to. Throw away your books. Stop feeding yourself on distractions. That is not what you are here for. You are here to act with reason, to act toward the people around you. Nothing else is required. Perhaps the gods have given thought to me and to what concerns me. If so, they are good, and they wish me no harm. A god who means harm to his own creation has no reason for existence. And if the gods have given no thought to me at all, if everything is governed by nothing but chance, then I can still be governed by reason. Either way, I have what I need. The perfection of character is this: to live each day as if it could be the last, without agitation, without sluggishness, without pretense. Not to perform calmness, not to act as a man who has achieved peace while inwardly he has not, but to actually be a man who requires nothing unusual in order to be well. The gods, the same gods you pray to, how much time do you think they give to the question of whether you will be comfortable today? They produced the world entire. They produce its continuation. They have no interest in your comfort. They have interest in the whole. Be part of the whole then. Work with it. Work for it. That is what they would ask, if they asked anything at all. How quickly everything vanishes. The bodies themselves disappear. The memory of them is swallowed by time. All that you can sense in the things of the world is like a river, always running. Everything flows and changes. The causes of everything run forward in infinite series. Almost nothing stands still long enough to be held. Think of those who came before you: Vespasian, Augustus, Hadrian, each one, a brief reign, a brief fame, then silence. Think of the physicians who furrowed their brows over the bedsides of great men, then died themselves. Think of the astrologers who announced the deaths of others as if death were a spectacle, then were announced in the same way. Think of the philosophers who argued endlessly about death and immortality. Where are they? Not one of them lasted. Not one of them held back the river by a single hour. And how many such as Croesus, how many such as Alexander, how many such as Caesar are now completely forgotten, swallowed not only by death but by the forgetting that follows death. One man is buried, and another man rises and takes his place. That man is buried too. This has been happening since the first morning. It will continue after the last one. The span of a life is a point. The substance of it is in flux. Perception is dim. The composition of the body is perishable. The soul is a restless thing. Fortune is hard to predict. Fame is uncertain. Everything that belongs to the body is a river. Everything that belongs to the soul is dream and vapor. Life is a war and a journey through a foreign country. What remains after all of it? Nothing that lasts very long. Time is a river of disappearing moments. The past is gone before you can turn to face it. The future has not arrived. The present is the only place you have ever lived, and the present is always very small. Do not say, "I will begin to live carefully when I have more time." Do not say, "I will turn to philosophy when things settle down." Even if you were to live 3,000 more years, even 30,000, you would not live a single moment other than this one. The longest life and the shortest life lose exactly the same thing. They lose the present, and the present is always gone the moment it arrives. You cannot lose what is already past. It has left. You cannot lose what has not yet come. It is not here. The only thing that can be lost is this moment. And yet this moment is what most men spend their lives avoiding. Do not trouble yourself with the whole of your life at once. Do not run forward into it. Do not let the future stand in the room with you as a source of dread. Stay in the present. One act, one breath, one step. Ask only, is what I am doing right now worthy of a rational being? If it is, continue. If it is not, stop. Look at things as they are. Do not give them names that make them larger than they are. Pain. It is either something the body endures, or it is a thought. If the body endures it, the body will tell you honestly what it is. If it is a thought, you have made it what it is. Opinion is the wound. Strip the opinion away, and the wound closes. The man who does not assign his own labels to events finds the world much quieter than it appeared to be. How much more harm is done in the world by anger and grief than by the things that cause them? A man weeps over a slight from someone whose opinion does not matter. A man grows angry over a loss of money that he would have spent on nothing. The weeping does more damage than the slight. The anger does more damage than the loss. Watch the anger as it rises. Watch the grief. They are not the things themselves. They are your additions to the things. You made them. You can set them down. A man's life is a little while. His existence is a flux. His perception is clouded. The composition of his body is corruptible. His soul cannot be known with certainty. Fortune is inconstant. Fame is uncertain. In a word, everything belonging to the body is a river running. Everything belonging to the soul is a dream. Life itself is a war and a long journey through a foreign land. And what comes after? The undiscoverable. What then is capable of guiding a man through all of this? One thing alone: philosophy. And philosophy consists in this: to keep the part within you that governs, free from violence and unharmed, superior to pleasure and to pain, doing nothing at random, nothing falsely, nothing with pretense. Not needing another man to do or not do anything, accepting whatever happens as coming from the same place that you yourself came from, and above all else, waiting for death with a settled mind, knowing that death is nothing other than a dissolving of the very same elements from which every living thing is composed. If there is no harm for the elements themselves in each of them passing perpetually into another, Why should a man look on the change and dissolution of all of them with suspicion? It is according to nature. Nothing that is according to nature can be evil. If it is not evil for the elements to change, then it is not evil for you to change. You are composed of elements. You will dissolve back into them. This is not a problem to be solved. It is the condition of everything that exists. Consider the soul, not what the poets say about it, not what the priests say about it. Look at it plainly. The soul harms itself when it turns away from any other person and wishes them ill. The soul harms itself when it gives itself over to pleasure or pain without restraint. The soul harms itself when it acts with pretense, when it does or says anything without sincerity. The soul harms itself when it does not direct its acts and impulses towards some end, but acts randomly, without thought, as if nothing mattered. These are not injuries done to you from outside. These are injuries you do to yourself. No one else can corrupt the ruling part. It submits only to its own choices. What is the use of praise? Look at those who praise. Look at what they know. Look at what they care about. Look at how quickly they will forget what they praised. The man who chases praise is chasing the opinion of people who cannot hold an opinion still for longer than a season. The thing they praise today, they will ignore tomorrow. The man they admire today, they will not remember in 10 years. Not because they are cruel, because they are mortal, and mortality moves on. It does not wait to honor the deserving. It moves on regardless. Shame on the soul that has not yet decided to be worthy, while the body still holds together, while it is still possible to decide. The man who is 60 and has not yet looked at himself honestly, what is he waiting for? The man who is 30 and still performs his virtues rather than practicing them, when does he intend to begin? There is no later. There never was a later. Every time you believed in later, later was already passing. Look at each thing naked. Remove the story you have wrapped around it. A fine banquet, dead fish, dead birds, dead animals, a Falernian wine, grape juice, a little thyme, and something rotten at its edges. A purple robe, sheep wool soaked in the blood of shellfish. This is not bitterness. This is accuracy. The man who sees things as they are is not made miserable by the seeing. He is freed by it. He does not need to chase what he has already seen clearly. Physical coupling, the friction of organs, a convulsion, and the ejection of mucus. Say this to yourself plainly and see what remains of the desire. The same method works on all things the world calls desirable. Strip off the reputation that has been attached to the thing. Look at the thing itself. Ask what it actually is. Then ask whether the wanting of it is still reasonable. A man's life. Strip the reputation from it too. A senator's career, years of dressing for other people's opinions, years of saying what the room requires, years of outlasting enemies while creating new ones. Strip the senator's toga from it and look at what remains. A man trying to secure himself in a world that cannot be secured. An emperor's reign, the same. The purple robe and the decisions that come with it, and the body that wears it and eventually stops wearing it. Strip the robe and look at what remains. A man, trying, in the time available to him. This is not said to discourage. This is said so that the right things are not overlooked. When you strip the borrowed reputation from everything, what remains is exactly this: the quality of your attention the quality of your action, the quality of what passes between you and the people around you. These things do not need a reputation attached to them to be what they are. They are real without it. They are the only things that are. Return to the governing part. Return to it again. How many times in a day does the mind wander into other men's business? Into what they said and what they meant and what they should have done instead? Into the future and all the ways the future might disappoint? Into the past and all the ways the past already has? Every minute spent in another man's ruling part is a minute stolen from your own. The governing part left unattended is not resting. It is drifting. And a drifting mind does not drift toward virtue. It drifts toward whatever it has been trained to drift toward. Train it then. Not once, not on the day you decide to begin. Every morning, every hour, every time you notice the drift. Notice, return. Notice, return. This is the whole of the practice. There is no more complicated instruction than that. Act according to nature. This is not a small instruction dressed in simple language. It is the whole of what is required. The nature of a rational being is to act for the common good, not for himself alone, not for his family alone, not for his city alone, for the whole, as part of the whole. A hand that worked only for the hand would be no hand at all. It would be a growth, a thing that has forgotten what it is for. The hand that works for the body works also for itself, because the body is what the hand belongs to. You belong to something larger. Acting for it is not sacrifice. It is the correct use of what you are. Do not expect the Republic of Plato. Do not wait for a world arranged according to your preferences before you begin to live in the one that exists. Be satisfied with even the smallest step forward. Consider that result not small. Who changes his inner life changes everything his inner life touches. And it touches more than it appears to. All men are working toward the same thing, though they do not know it. Some work toward it wisely and some foolishly. Some through understanding and some through obstruction. But the direction of nature carries all of them regardless. The man who resists it makes the journey harder for himself. He does not change the destination. He only bruises himself against what was going to happen to him anyway. Receive without arrogance. Relinquish without struggle. These two things cover almost every circumstance a man will encounter. Good fortune arrives. Receive it. Do not grip it. Good fortune departs. Relinquish it. Do not drag after it. The man who receives well and relinquishes well is disturbed by very little, because very little that happens to him falls outside those two. This book was written on campaign, among the Quadi, on the river called the Gran, the tent at night, the cold and the fire, the army sleeping. The man writing it was the most powerful man in the world. He was writing for himself. He was not writing to be remembered. He was writing because he needed to. The same man who could order any execution, who controlled any appointment, who held the empire in the decisions of a single morning, was writing in the dark about how to be better, about how to stay honest, about how not to drift. He was not performing the writing. No one was watching. There was no audience, only the page and the thought and the fire going low. That is the book you are listening to, a man's private instructions to himself, about how to live, about how not to fail himself before the day ends. He did not always succeed. He says so himself inside these pages. He is not presenting a finished man. He is presenting a man still working, which is the only kind of man worth listening to on the subject of how to live. Book 3, written at Carnuntum Decay, Beauty in the Incidental, the Body as Vessel. He was at Carnuntum when he wrote this, a garrison town on the Danube, cold in winter, far from Rome, far from warmth and marble and the sound of a city that knew his name. He was in his 50s. He had been emperor for more than a decade. He was ill, intermittently, with something the physicians could not name. He was tired in a way that sleep does not cure. And he was writing. The third book is different from the second. The second book is a man fighting. The third book is a man who has accepted the fight. There is a quality of quieter urgency here. Not panic, but a man who has done the arithmetic and knows what the numbers mean. The time is short. It was always short. But now there is a difference between knowing this and knowing it in the body, and he had arrived at the second kind of knowing. He wrote, "Do not waste the remainder of your life." Not, do not waste your life. The remainder of it. What is left after the portion already spent on distraction and self-deception and delay. He was not exempting himself. He was including himself. The remainder is all that can be worked with now. Make it count for what the rest did not. He noticed something about old men and how they are not the same as young men who have aged. The body does not simply wear down. It changes its relationship to the mind. The mind must work harder to stay itself. Not because the mind weakens first, but because the body, declining, makes more noise than it did when it was young and did not need to demand attention. Pain speaks. Fatigue speaks. The cold in old joints speaks in a language the young do not have to hear yet. He was learning to hear these things without obeying them. He wrote about decay, not as something to dread, as something to see clearly, because clarity about it removes the power it has over us when it stays hidden. All things are decaying. This is not a lament. It is a description of the world as it is. The man who refuses to look at his own decay is not thereby spared it. He is simply surprised by it when it arrives at his door, as if it had not always been on its way. The body that was strong at 20 begins at 50 to make its terms known. It does not ask permission. It does not wait until you have finished what you were doing. The iron will not hold its edge forever. The fire that burned through a young man's nights burns differently now. Not less, but with a different quality. Steadier, perhaps, less wasteful, more deliberate. A man who has watched his own body begin its long withdrawal has information that no young man has yet. He knows what the body actually is. Not what he imagined it to be when he was young and could not yet tell the difference between himself and it. He wrote about the beauty of things as they actually are. This is the part of the third book that surprises people who come to Marcus expecting only severity. He was capable of noticing beauty, not the beauty of ornament and display, the beauty of things that did not ask to be called beautiful. He noticed how bread, when it bakes, cracks and splits at its surface, and how this cracking, which the baker did not plan, which no one designed, has a rightness to it, an appetizing quality that follows from the nature of the thing itself. He noticed how ripe figs split, how olives, when they are about to fall, take on a particular look that is close to rotting but is not yet rotting, and that this look is its own kind of beauty. He noticed the foaming mouth of a lion, the way ears of wheat hang at harvest, the furrowed brow of a wild boar. Not beautiful by convention. Beautiful because they are exactly what they are, unperformed, unstyled, undisguised. The man who has trained his eye to see this way does not need beauty to come to him in the ways the world arranges it. He finds it everywhere, in the way an old person's skin has recorded their years, in the sound of a horse at rest, in the pattern left in mud by someone walking through it an hour ago and gone now. This is not sentimentality. It is attention. The man who cultivates attention does not need to go anywhere to find something worth his time. The man who has not cultivated it goes everywhere and finds nothing that satisfies for long. He wrote about the rational soul, not in the way a lecturer writes about it, in the way a man who has been fighting to hold on to it writes about it. The rational soul surveys itself. This is what distinguishes it from everything else in nature. The rock does not know it is a rock. The river does not know it is a river. The animal moves by appetite and does not observe itself moving. But the rational soul can step back from itself and ask, what is this thing I am doing? Is this what I would choose if I were choosing clearly? Is this who I am, or only who I am being right now, in this moment of pressure? No other thing in the world can ask these questions. And yet most men go through their lives without asking them. Not because they cannot, because they have not yet noticed that the capacity is there. The rational soul also reaches outward. It does not only know itself, it knows other rational souls. You are not a closed system. You share the same rational nature with every person alive. This is not a metaphor. It is the operating principle. What harms the hive is not good for the bee. What harms the city is not good for the citizen, even if the citizen cannot see it from where he stands. He wrote about simplicity, about stripping back, about the virtue of the life that does not require much. Live as on a mountain. Whether you live in a palace or a garrison or a single rented room, make it a mountain. Which means strip away what does not matter. Keep what does. And make no great distinction between the two settings, because the setting has never been the point. It does not matter where you are. It matters what you bring to where you are. The man who cannot find peace in Carnuntum would not find it in Rome. He would carry the noise with him. The noise is interior. It goes where he goes. This is the thing about Marcus that the biographies sometimes miss. He had everything the world considers worth having. Wealth beyond what a man could spend in 100 lifetimes. Power that no other human being on earth could contest. The admiration, genuine or performed, of an entire civilization. And he was writing in a cold garrison about the importance of needing less. Not because he was ungrateful, because he had tested the proposition. He had lived inside the answer that the world holds out to people as the solution, and he knew what it did and did not provide. It did not provide what philosophy provides. It did not provide what this, the act of thinking honestly, late at night, in a garrison, about what a life should be, provides. He wrote about the body as vessel. Not with contempt. With the particular affection of a man who knows what the vessel contains and therefore cares for it without being attached to it. The body has its limits. It always did. When you were young, you did not feel the limits because the body was working so well that it was almost invisible to you. You did not notice the machine because the machine was running quietly. As it wears, the machine begins to speak. At first in suggestion, then in complaint, then in demands that interrupt everything else. The Stoic does not pretend the body is not speaking. He hears it. He attends to what genuinely needs attending to, and then he does not grant it authority over his interior life. The body suffers. Let it say so. The mind does not have to agree. This is not bravado. This is not the performance of toughness for an audience. There is no audience here. There is only a man and his notebook and the cold of a place far from home. He wrote, "The body is a little soul carrying a corpse." An old line. Epictetus said something like it first. But Marcus wrote it down, which means he was working with it. Turning it over. Finding out whether he believed it or only admired it. There is a difference. A thing you admire sits on a shelf. A thing you believe changes how you move through a day. He wrote about the things people do instead of philosophy. Not with contempt for the people, with a kind of sorrow for the waste of it. The man who occupies himself with other people's affairs, who monitors what they are doing and saying and thinking about him, who has never once in his life sat quietly in a room and asked himself what he is for. The days he burns through doing this, the years, the whole of a life in some cases, spent watching other lives and never inhabiting his own. Marcus was not immune to this. He was writing to himself. He knew the pull of other people's affairs. He was an emperor. There was never a moment when other people's affairs were not his official concern. Which is exactly why he was writing this. To remember the difference between what is officially his concern and what is actually his concern. Between the life he must administer and the life he must live. The things actually worth your time. Not what the world tells you are worth your time. Not what the voices in the room tell you are worth your time. What is actually worth it when you apply the test of your rational nature to them honestly and without sentimentality. Acting justly. Treating the people around you as they deserve to be treated, which requires knowing who they are, not who it is convenient for them to be. Telling the truth, including the truths that make you look smaller. Doing your work without requiring the work to praise you back. He wrote about things that decay and pass and leave no trace. The world is full of men who built things and are gone. Their buildings remain, or they do not. Their names remain, or they do not. In either case, the men themselves are absent from the result. What they were in the privacy of their own minds, that is completely gone. The fear they felt the night before a battle. The doubt they carried about whether the decision was right. The small private grief that no one else knew about and that they took to the ground with them. All of it dissolved into the same elements that will dissolve you. Into the same silence that is waiting for everyone, without exception, without appeal. What then is worth doing? What you would do if no one were watching. What you would do if there were no record kept. What you would do if the only measure were your own honest assessment of whether the act was good. He wrote about endings. Not as a man afraid of them. As a man taking their measure. The man who has sorted out what matters and what does not, he can approach the end without the particular grief of the man who suspects he spent his time on the wrong things. Not without sadness, perhaps. There is always something to grieve in leaving. The light at certain hours, a particular sound, the faces of people you did not see enough. But the man who has lived with his values intact does not also carry the grief of wasted time. And that is a different kind of leaving, a cleaner one. He was in Carnuntum when he wrote this. Cold, tired, far from people who loved him by choice rather than by obligation. And he was writing about beauty, about decay, about the small, unremarked things that are beautiful precisely because no one arranged them to be. The crack in the bread, the fig at the edge of splitting, the old man's face that has recorded everything that happened to it without asking to be spared any of it. He was learning still, at 50, in a garrison, in winter, how to see, not more dramatically, more accurately. And that is what the third book is. A man practicing sight, refusing to look away from what is difficult to look at, and finding, in the looking, something that does not quite deserve to be called comfort, but is close to it. Something steadier than comfort. Something that does not require the circumstances to change in order to be felt. Book 4, The Universe and the Self. The fourth book lifts its gaze. That is the quality that sets it apart from the 3 books before it. The first 3 were close to the ground. The teachers who shaped him, the morning that refused to begin, the body in a garrison wearing toward its end. The fourth steps back from all of it and asks what the whole thing looks like from a distance. Marcus practiced what some of the Stoics called the view from above. Not a literal elevation, a cognitive one. Place yourself above the room you are in, then above the building, then above the city, until the city becomes a shape in a larger landscape, then above the landscape, until the landscape becomes a color in a continent. Continue until the entire inhabited earth is a single object, small, quiet, turning slowly in something much larger than itself. Then come back. Come back to the room, to the specific problem that was filling all available space before you began, to the face of the person you were in conflict with, to the thing that felt, from inside it, like something that could not be survived. Look at it again from room level. Marcus was not saying the problem is small. He was saying habitual proximity has made it appear larger than it is in relation to the rest of what exists. And that distortion, the way closeness inflates, is the thing worth correcting. The practice does not eliminate the problem. It restores it to its actual size, which is almost always smaller than it appeared at close range. He wrote about this practice because he needed it. He was emperor. The problems that came to him came at the largest scale. Wars, plague, famine, succession. The competing claims of people who each believed their grievance was the most important thing in the known world, and who were not entirely wrong because their grievance was their world. He had to respond to all of it, without losing himself to any of it, without becoming the man who has been so entirely absorbed into his role that there is no longer anyone behind the decisions asking whether the decisions are right. The view from above is the medicine against absorption. The man who can lift himself above the immediate, not in denial of it, not in retreat from it, who can see his own position as one position among many, his own moment as one moment in a sequence that began long before him and will continue long after him. That man has something available to him that the man locked inside his immediate position does not. Perspective, which is not the same as distance. Distance is merely space. Perspective is understanding. He wrote about placing any present difficulty inside the larger picture. This argument is not the last argument you will have. This year is not the permanent condition of your existence. This loss, which feels right now like it has altered the ground permanently beneath your feet, is not the ground. It is a weather event on ground that extends in every direction beyond what you can currently see. The ground remains. He was not offering the kind of consolation that tells you things will get better and trusts you to find that sufficient. He was offering calibration. The suggestion that the emotional weight you assign to a thing is frequently out of proportion to the thing itself. Not because your feelings are wrong, because your assessment of scale is. And correcting the assessment does not eliminate the feeling. It contextualizes it, gives it room to exist without expanding to fill all available space. The universe is very large. You are in it. Everything happening to you is happening inside it. And the universe, as Marcus understood it, is not a collection of separate objects in collision. It is one continuous living thing, a single organism of which you are a part, just as a limb is part of a body. Not a metaphor for connection. An actual claim about the nature of reality. One he believed, tested against his experience, and kept writing down. He wrote about what it means to want the right things. This is the argument that sits at the center of Stoic philosophy, and which Marcus returned to throughout the Meditations, each time from a slightly different angle, as a man testing a proposition against his experience and finding that it held, or finding that it required refinement. The question is, what is actually good? Not what feels good. Not what the world considers good. Not what would make you feel safe, or comfortable, or admired for having it. What is actually good, in the sense that its presence genuinely improves you, and its absence genuinely harms you? The Stoic answer is stark. Only virtue. Not wealth. Wealth is preferable to poverty, other things being equal, and there is nothing in Marcus that says otherwise. But a man with great wealth and no virtue is worse off in the Stoic account than a man with no wealth and genuine virtue. Because the wealth is outside the man. It can be removed. It can corrupt. It can create conditions in which being good is harder than it would have been without it. The virtue is inside. In a sense, it is the man. Not fame. Fame is the opinion of others about you, held in other people's minds, over which you have no final authority. Those people will revise their opinion. They will die. The opinion will die with them. And nothing you were will have changed. Not longevity. A long life lived without honesty is not a better outcome than a shorter one inhabited with integrity. Marcus was dying slowly, across years, of something neither he nor his physicians could name. And he wrote as a man for whom more years was never the thing he was after. What the Stoics called preferred indifference. Preferred, because there is nothing wrong with preferring them when they are available. Indifferent, in the sense that your fundamental condition as a human being is not determined by whether you have them. Wealth, health, comfort, status, longevity. All preferred, none of them the point. This sounds to the modern ear like a philosophy of resignation. It is the opposite. If the only genuine good is virtue, and virtue is a quality of the will, of how you choose, of what you do with the capacity you were given, then the genuine good is entirely within your reach, regardless of external conditions. The man in prison can be virtuous. The man who has lost everything can be virtuous. The man who is ill, who has been wronged, who has been forgotten, he can be virtuous. And the man who has been given every preferred thing, health, wealth, power, a long life, can fail to be virtuous, and has therefore failed at the only thing that actually mattered. Marcus sat at the center of the Roman Empire and kept writing this down. He had the preferred indifference in quantities no other human being of his era could match. And in the space between his administrative decisions, he kept returning to the one good that none of it provided. He was not performing humility. He was not staging a drama of the enlightened ruler who has seen through the vanity of power. There was no one to perform for. He was taking stock. What do I actually have, in the only sense that having something finally means anything? Whatever I am doing right now with my rational faculty, whether I am bringing it honestly to what is in front of me, whether the choice I am making comes from my values or from my fear of what happens if I act against what the room expects. He wrote, "It is enough to act well now, even though I will not remember it." Not, "It is enough to act well for the record." Not, "It is enough to act well because it will produce lasting effects." Not even, "It is enough to act well because someone will eventually notice." Enough for this moment that the act was the right act. Enough that a person with the capacity to act well used that capacity. In a moment that is already passing. Into a past that will remember nothing of the choosing. He wrote about what cannot be taken. Not what will not be taken. He had no illusions about the reliability of what the world leaves intact. Everything the world possesses can be confiscated, can be lost, can wear out. He knew this. He wrote it from different angles across years because knowing it once is not sufficient. But some things cannot be taken, because they are not held in any place accessible to anything outside you. Your judgment about what something is, your choice about how to respond to it, your willingness or refusal to act from your values in this particular moment. These are not in your hands the way a cup is in your hands. They are not in the world. They are in no location that can be seized. A man can take your property. He cannot take your assessment of what his taking means. He cannot take your decision about how to conduct yourself in response. He can lock you in a room. He cannot lock the room of your mind. Marcus could command armies. He could not command the quality of his own attention. That required a different kind of work. Quieter, slower, less visible than the movement of legions across a frontier. Daily. Every day. Not once achieved and then permanent. Because the interior is not permanent by nature. It erodes. Not dramatically. The erosion is quiet, the way stone erodes, not in a single catastrophic event, but through contact with something barely moving that never stops. The small accommodations. The moments when it was easier to let the impression go unchallenged. The times when you said the thing the room required rather than the thing you believed. Each one, nothing. Accumulated, the slow wearing away of who you decided to be. The citadel requires maintenance. Not the performance of citadel maintenance for an audience that would be impressed by the performance. the actual daily return, the habit of inspection, the willingness to find what has eroded and attend to it without dramatizing the finding. He wrote about equanimity. And here it is worth being careful, because equanimity is frequently confused with something it is not. It is not the absence of feeling. It is not the performance of calm by a man who is not calm. It is not the suppression of what is real in favor of what is socially acceptable. Equanimity is the condition of a man whose interior is in sufficient order that when disturbance comes, and it comes, he has stable ground to return to. Not immunity to disturbance, a known place to return to when the disturbance passes. This is different from numbness. Numbness is the absence of feeling. Equanimity is the management of feeling, the refusal to let feeling become the whole of what you are. The feeling arrives. It is real. It is attended to. And then it is set in relation to something larger than itself, to what you have decided matters, to your rational assessment, to the person you have chosen to be, and from that relationship, the response emerges. A man can be moved and still be unmoved. Not as a paradox, as a description of the practice. Moved because he is human and humans are made to feel. Unmoved because beneath the feeling there is something that the feeling does not determine. That is the citadel, not stone walls. The stable interior that continues to hold its shape while everything outside it continues its ordinary motion. Maintained, not built once and left. Inhabited, not simply possessed. He wrote about what a man inherits who did not ask for what he was given. Marcus did not choose to be emperor. He was placed into it by a chain of decisions that belonged to other men. Hadrian chose Antoninus as his successor. Antoninus was required to adopt Marcus. And so Marcus arrived at the center of the world by a sequence of arrangements in which his own preference was never the deciding factor. He sat at the center of the world and kept a notebook about how to be a decent person. The disproportion is almost remarkable. The largest administrative apparatus in the Western world, armies, provinces, grain supplies, aqueducts, courts, laws, flowing through one man. And that man, in the space between decisions, writing sentences to himself about how to pay attention. Not how to rule better. How to be better. Because he knew, and this is what the fourth book returns to, that the ruling was not the point. Not that it was unimportant. He took it seriously, worked at it carefully, died at his post on campaign rather than returning to Rome to die in comfort. But the ruling was the circumstance. The character of the man doing the ruling was the substance. What the ruler does with the small space that the role does not fill, the space between decisions, the space at night when the palace is quiet, the space inside the mind that no imperial decree can reach, that is what the Meditations records. A man using what was left of a very full life to ask what the whole enterprise was for. He arrived at answers. Provisional ones. He kept returning to them because provisional answers require returning to. They are not conclusions. They are working positions that must be tested again each time the conditions change. The universe is one. What serves the whole is good. What serves only the part at the expense of the whole is not good, whatever it appears to be in the short run. Virtue is the only real good. Everything else is a condition to be worked with, not a destination to be reached. What is within your power is entirely within your power. What is outside it is not within your control, though it may demand your full attention and your honest response. He wrote all of this not because he had solved it, but because he had not yet solved it. And writing it down was the closest he could come to holding it in place long enough to work with it. The fourth book is the widest of the Meditations. Wide in scope, the whole universe and the single human soul held in the same frame simultaneously. Wide in its tolerance for difficulty. Wide in what it is willing to look at without flinching. We are reading this now, almost 2,000 years after it was written, in conditions that Marcus could not have imagined in any detail. And the sentences still hold. Not because they are clever, because they are true. Because what they describe about the interior life of a human being who is trying to act well is not historically limited, has not aged, and does not require the Roman Empire as its context. The notebook was never intended to be published. It was not literature. It was the record of a practice. And what it records, in the fourth book especially, is a man choosing. Choosing the same things again and again. Finding that the choosing itself was the substance of it. Not the outcome of the choosing. The act. The daily return to what he knew and kept forgetting and had to write down again to remember. You can take a sentence from Marcus and set it on a wall and look at it until it becomes part of the decoration. Or you can take it and turn it in your hands today, in this day, in this particular condition that is entirely unlike a garrison on the Danube, and entirely like it in every way that matters. He was writing to himself. He is not addressing you. But the questions he kept returning to are the same questions, and if you are honest, you already know it. What am I doing with the time I have? Not the time I will have. The time I have. What quality of attention am I bringing to the people around me? To the work in front of me? To the interior of my own mind, the only territory I can genuinely be said to govern? The fourth book does not answer these questions. It refuses to. It insists, instead, on the continued asking, on the habit of return, on the understanding that the man who keeps returning to the question is already doing the work. The asking is the practice. The practice is the whole of it. Book 5, Duty and Morning Resolve. The fifth book begins before dawn. Not metaphorically. In the actual dark, before the actual day has started, Marcus writes about the moment he does not want to get up. He is the most powerful man in the known world. And he is lying in bed, not wanting to move. This is either a very small detail or the most honest thing anyone has ever written about the daily life of the mind. It is both. He poses the question to himself directly. Why is it hard to leave the warmth of the bed and go to the work that is waiting? And then he answers it. Not with discipline. Not with the instruction to be harder on yourself, to want the right things, to overcome weakness through force. With a question. Were you made for lying in warmth? Or were you made for something else? He already knows the answer. He is not asking it because he is uncertain. He is asking it because the asking is the mechanism. Because the body does not respond to commands the way the mind imagines it should. It responds to reasons. Give the body a reason that is larger than its immediate preference, and the preference loses its authority. Not entirely, not permanently, but enough. The word he uses is nature. Not willpower, not virtue as an abstraction to be performed. Nature. He understood the human being as a creature with a specific nature, the way a bee has a nature, the way a root has a nature, the way any part of the living world has a shape that is most fully itself when acting in accordance with what it was made to do. The bee that does not collect pollen is not at rest. It is frustrated. It is a bee that has not yet found what it is for. And the man who lies in the warmth beyond what the warmth is for, who stays past the point where the rest has done its work, is not at ease. He is a man who has confused comfort with purpose, and found in the confusion that neither is satisfied. Marcus was not ascetic about the body. He did not think pleasure was the enemy. He thought misplaced pleasure was a form of confusion, a misreading of the self that led over time to a life that felt smaller than the person living it. The body wants warmth. Give it warmth. And then, when the warmth has done what warmth is for, give it the work. The work is not a punishment for being a body. It is what the body was built toward. He is writing this to himself. In the dark. Before the light changes, and the day begins, and the empire requires its answers from him. He is doing what people have done before difficult things, for as long as there have been difficult things. He is reminding himself who he is and what he is for, so that the day ahead has a foundation under it. Not inspiration. Foundation. Inspiration is the hope that the feeling will carry you through. Foundation is the understanding that the feeling will not always be there, and that something more durable must be present when it is not. The fifth book is the one most people know a single line from. They have read it on a card, or seen it quoted, or heard someone cite it in a speech about resilience. They have encountered the line without its context, which is the way most wisdom travels, stripped of the life it came from, reduced to a phrase that can fit inside a frame. What they are less likely to know is that the line comes from a man who had already been lying in the dark, arguing with himself about whether to get up before he wrote it. The philosophy is downstream of the morning. The courage required by the fifth book is the ordinary, unspectacular courage of beginning again. The fifth book contains one of the most quoted sentences Marcus ever wrote. It is the sentence about obstacles. The fire, he says, feeds on what is thrown into it. What blocks the path forward becomes the path forward. What resists the action is the material of the action. 2,000 years later, people have this sentence on walls. They have it printed on shirts. They quote it in meetings about quarterly targets and athletic performance and startup resilience. Marcus would have found this bewildering. Not because the applications are wrong, because the sentence, removed from what it was built on, becomes a slogan rather than a conclusion, something that sounds true without the work underneath it that makes it actually true. The work underneath it is this. Marcus believed, not as a preference but as a structural claim about the nature of things, that what you encounter is not separable from what you are being asked to do. The circumstance is not an obstacle sitting in front of the task. The circumstance is the task. There is a distinction here that matters enormously and that almost everyone misses. Most people experience difficulty as a detour. Something has gotten in the way of what they were going to do. The plan was disrupted. The expected path closed. The thing that was supposed to happen did not happen. And so they wait, for the difficulty to pass, for conditions to improve, for the original plan to become available again. Marcus is saying something different. He is saying that the difficulty is not a detour from the work. It is the work. That the rational faculty, the part of you that is specifically human, specifically capable of response rather than mere reaction, exists precisely for this. Not for the smooth days. For the difficult ones. Because the smooth days do not require the faculty. They run on their own momentum. The difficult days are the days when the choice of how to meet what arrives is actually a choice and not merely a continuation. He was emperor during one of the hardest periods the Roman world had faced in generations. Plague. A war on the northern frontier that he had not chosen and could not quickly end. A trusted general's betrayal. The death of children. A body that was failing him slowly, requiring more management than it had when he was younger. None of this was what he had planned for himself. None of it was what Hadrian had imagined when he arranged the succession. None of it was within his control to simply will away. And so he wrote, the fire. The fire that does not shrink from the wood thrown onto it. That does not require the wood to be a particular kind of wood. That takes whatever arrives and makes it part of what it already is. The image is important. He did not write the soldier who endures. He did not write the ox who pulls regardless. He wrote the fire. Because the fire is not enduring the wood. It is transforming it. It is making the wood into itself. The obstacle is not merely survived. It is incorporated. The difficulty becomes the occasion for exactly the kind of response that difficulty calls for, which is not gritting your teeth, but bringing what you are fully to bear on what is in front of you. This is not a comfortable teaching. It does not say, this will pass. It does not say, it gets easier. It says, the difficulty you are facing is not in the way of your life. It is your life, at this particular moment, asking you to meet it as you are capable of meeting it. Whether you meet it that way is the only question. The fifth book turns to praise. Specifically, why Marcus distrusted it so completely. He was not a man who pretended he didn't want approval. He was a man who observed, carefully and over many years, what the wanting of approval actually did to the person who wanted it. And he found that it did almost nothing good. He wrote about the people whose entire sense of themselves was held in the opinions of others. Watch them. Watch what happens when the approval comes. There is a brief elevation, the particular warmth of being seen, of having one's worth reflected back, and then it subsides. And the need is exactly what it was before. The approval did not satisfy it. It renewed it. He understood the mechanism. The person who needs the room's good opinion has handed something precious to the room, the authority to determine his own value. And the room, as Marcus knew, does not hold that authority with any particular care. The room is busy with its own concerns. The room's opinion shifts with circumstances, with mood, with what it was told last. The room is not a reliable judge of anything, least of all the worth of the person standing in it waiting to be judged. And yet people organize entire lives around its verdict. They adjust what they say, what they choose, what they wear and how they stand, and which version of themselves they bring into any given room. All of it aimed at an outcome that, even when it arrives, does not stay. He was not immune to this. He was emperor. Everyone in his presence was watching him. Everyone had an opinion about what he was doing and whether it was sufficient and whether he was the right man for the weight he had been given. He felt it. He would not have written about it so specifically if he had not felt it. What he wrote was this: think about the people whose praise you are seeking. Consider them honestly. Not their positions or their power or the social consequence of their approval. Them, their actual quality of mind, their inner life as you understand it, the way they spend the hours that are purely their own. And ask, is this a person whose judgment of my worth is worth organizing my behavior around? Usually the answer, examined honestly, is no. Not because the people are bad. Because judgment of another person's worth is not actually available to other people, not in any final or reliable form. The only evaluation that reaches inside the thing being evaluated is the one the thing conducts itself. He pushed further. Even the praise of the genuinely wise, the rare approval of a person whose judgment actually earns respect, even that is not the point. Because the wise person's praise tells you something about your action. It does not tell you what you are. What you are is what you have done when no one was looking. What you have chosen when the choosing was private. What you have maintained when maintaining it gave you no credit at all. This is not a philosophy of isolation. It is not the instruction to care nothing for anyone and live inside your own evaluation alone. It is the instruction to locate the ground of your own judgment correctly. Not in what others think of you. In what you, with full honesty, think of yourself, and whether what you think corresponds to what you have actually done. He knew that locating the ground there was harder. The room's opinion has the great advantage of arriving from outside, which makes it feel objective. It seems to confirm or deny something real. Your own evaluation requires you to be both the judge and the judged, to hold yourself to a standard that you yourself have set, using faculties that belong to the same person being evaluated. This is uncomfortable. There is nowhere external to appeal to. No authority above yourself to hand the question to. But it is the only evaluation that cannot be taken from you by a room whose mood has changed. The fifth book ends where it began. In the morning, before the day has made its demands. In the only space where a person can actually prepare, not for a specific outcome, but for the quality of response that whatever arrives will require. There is something Marcus returns to repeatedly in this book that is easy to pass over. The will. Not willpower in the popular sense, the clenched teeth version, the white-knuckled refusal to give in, but the will as Marcus understood it, the faculty that directs the action, the part of the person that chooses how to interpret what happens and what to do in response. He called it the ruling faculty, the hegemonikon, the governing intelligence, the inner capacity that does not belong to circumstances, that external events cannot reach, that remains available regardless of what the day produces. Everything else, in Marcus's understanding, was subject to fortune. Health, reputation, the outcomes of decisions made in good faith but turned by circumstances no one could have predicted. The length of a life, the character of the people you are required to work with, and the condition of the world you have inherited, and the distance between what you intended and what actually happened. All of this, subject to fortune. None of it fully within reach. The will is not subject to fortune. It is the one thing that cannot be taken, not by illness, not by defeat, not by the failure of circumstances to cooperate with the plan. Even a man in chains retains the will in the only sense that matters, the capacity to meet what arrives with the best of what he has. He was not writing about heroism. He was writing about the daily, unremarkable discipline of returning, each morning before the difficulty has arrived, to the understanding of what is yours and what is not. What is yours? The response. The quality of attention you bring. The degree of honesty with which you meet the facts as they are, rather than as you wish they were. The willingness to keep doing the work when the work is not being praised and the conditions are not cooperating and the morning is cold and the day ahead is long and nothing about any of it feels inevitable. What is not yours? Everything else. Not as a counsel of passivity, as a counsel of precision. Put your effort where it has purchase. Do not spend the self on what the self cannot move. Spend it, fully and without reservation, on what it can. He wrote this in a tent, in the last years of his life, in a war he had not sought, on a frontier he had not chosen, in a body that was telling him plainly that there was not much time left. He wrote it anyway, because writing it was the practice. Because the practice was the only part of it that was entirely his. The fifth book is not a manual for getting more done. It is not a productivity system in classical dress. It is not even primarily about courage, though courage is present throughout it. It is about the quality of the relationship between a person and the life they have been given to live. Do you meet it? Do you meet it with everything you have in the actual conditions it presents, without waiting for the conditions to become easier, or the room to offer its approval, or the obstacle to step aside and let you through? He asked himself this every morning. Not because he always answered well, because the asking was the only honest preparation for a day that would not wait for him to feel ready. The day does not wait. It arrives. And what you bring to it, the quality of presence, the steadiness of attention, the willingness to act without waiting for circumstances to warrant acting, that is the whole of what you have to give. It is enough. It has always been enough. It is the only thing that has ever been enough. Book 6, The Good and Right Action. The sixth book does not begin with a famous line. There is no opening image that has travelled into popular use. No sentence that has appeared on walls or in collections of quoted wisdom or in speeches about resilience and perseverance. The sixth book is the middle of the work. And the middle of anything is harder to find your way into than the beginning or the end. The beginning has a shape. The end has gravity. The middle is where the actual living occurs, where the initial clarity of purpose has become familiar, and the novelty of the struggle has worn smooth, and what remains is not drama, but the daily, unspectacular business of continuing. Marcus knew this better than almost anyone. Not because he had read about it, because he had lived in it for a long time, in conditions that did not soften. He was managing a plague that had moved through the empire's cities and not yet finished. He was conducting a war on the northern frontier that had already outlasted every expectation of how long it would take. He was watching people around him fall away, through death, through the ordinary failure that long difficulty produces even in capable men. And through all of it, in whatever space remained between the obligations of the position, he wrote. Not to be preserved, not to construct a philosophy for later readers, to examine. The Meditations are not essays. They are not arguments constructed to persuade a reader of a conclusion. They are the record of a man watching his own mind work and making corrections to what he observed. No reader was assumed. No audience was being managed. The absence of performance is the whole point. By the sixth book, the project has been running long enough that what formality was present in the earlier writing has loosened. What is left is the examination plain. And the question the examination returns to in this book, more persistently than in any other, is this. What is the good? Not, what is the reward for correct action? Not, what recognition follows from doing the right thing? Not, how will the world respond, and does that response confirm the action was worth anything at all? The good lies in the doing. That is the claim the sixth book makes. Not once. Not as a maxim to be memorized and stored, but as a conclusion arrived at from multiple directions, tested from different angles, returned to with the patience of a man who has not yet found the idea fully adequate, and so keeps pressing it until he has. The world will not confirm the good action. This is not a complaint. It is an observation. The world is not arranged to notice the quality of your inner life. It is arranged to respond to outcomes, to visible consequences, to effects that register in ways external to the person who produced them. Marcus sat at the center of the world's largest administrative apparatus. He received reports about everything. He was aware, better than anyone alive, of how much of what actually happened was invisible to the people who evaluated it from the outside. He knew the gap between action and recognition, not as a disappointment, as a structural feature of how things are. And the sixth book is, in part, his reckoning with that gap. If the good does not produce recognition, not always, not reliably, then the good must carry its own justification. The action must be sufficient without the confirmation. The doing must be enough, because the alternative is to make the quality of the action dependent on the response of a world that is not reliable and has not agreed to be your judge. He refused this. Quietly, without any announcement of the refusal. as one of the plain structural conclusions that follow, once you have looked at the thing long enough from the way things actually are. There is a passage in the 6th book that Marcus does not frame as an important passage. He places it among other observations without emphasis. He does not mark it as a conclusion. He states it and moves on. A vine in autumn is fitted for what it is fitted for. What it produces because of what it is. Not because it decided to be generous. Not because it sought praise for the quality of its fruit. Because it is a vine. The vine that does not produce in season is not a vine that is resting. It is a vine that has not yet become what a vine is. He is making a claim about nature, not as poetry, as logic. The fire makes heat, not as an act of generosity toward the cold, because it is fire. A fire that does not make heat is not a contained fire. It is a fire that has not yet burned. The rational soul, in his understanding, works the same way. The soul that acts rationally, that thinks clearly, acts justly, meets other people as the fellow participants in a shared life that they are, is not performing virtue. It is doing what the soul, when it is functioning correctly, does. This sounds easy to agree with. It is not easy to live from, because the experience of virtue is not the experience of fire. Fire does not observe itself burning. It does not wonder whether the heat it produces is being appreciated. It does not feel the gap between what it is doing and what it is receiving in return. A person does. And Marcus was not interested in making the task sound easier than it was. He wrote about it plainly. The action can be correct, and the result can still be wrong. You can reason well and still be mistaken. You can act in good faith and still cause harm. You can do everything that is within your power and still arrive at an outcome that does not resemble what you intended. This is not a failure of the system. This is how things are. What virtue produces is not guaranteed outcomes. It produces a soul that is operating according to its nature. The outcome belongs to what he called fortune. The soul belongs to you. He was not comfortable with anger. The 6th book returns to this. Not because anger is morally disqualifying. He was not interested in moral purity as a performance. Because anger, as Marcus understood it, is a form of confusion about what the other person is. The man who wrongs you is a man who has made an error about what is good. He has chosen something he believed would benefit him. He was wrong. And in being wrong, he has damaged himself more than he has damaged you, because the damage to you is external. It touches what fortune has given you, which was never fully yours. But the damage he has done to himself is to the faculty that is supposed to guide him. Getting angry at him is like getting angry at a man who has a fever. The fever is not a moral failure. It is a condition. It requires treatment, if treatment is available. It requires, at minimum, that you not increase the heat. He said, the best way to correct a wrong done to you is not to become the kind of person who would do it. He said it without self-congratulation, as a plain fact about what works. And then, because he was not writing to be admired, He said the harder thing underneath it: you cannot always manage this. There will be times when the anger comes before the understanding, when the heat arrives before the clarity, when you respond to the wrong done with a quality of response that does not reflect the person you are trying to be. The correction in those cases is to correct, not to punish yourself, not to construct a theatre of self-accusation that consumes the energy the correction requires. To observe what happened, note the departure from the standard, return to the standard, and continue. The sixth book is not a record of a man who never felt anger. It is the record of a man who understood what anger was, watched himself experience it, and refused to let the experience become the verdict. There is a note in the sixth book that reads, "Men exist for the sake of one another." It is placed quietly between other observations. It does not arrive with any fanfare. It does not announce itself as the center of anything. But it is. Because the entire Stoic understanding of the human being depends on this claim, not as a sentiment, as a description of what the human creature actually is and what it is for. The human being is a social animal, not by preference, not by convenience, by nature. What this means, in Marcus's understanding, is that the isolation of the self from the community it belongs to, the retreat into private advantage, the choosing of personal benefit at the expense of the common good, is not simply an ethical failure. It is a failure of the creature to be what it is. The ant that works only for itself is not a liberated ant. It is an ant that has lost its nature. He understood his own position through this lens. The emperor who uses his power for personal advantage, who arranges the world to serve his own comfort, who treats the administration of the empire as a resource to be consumed rather than a responsibility to be discharged, has not simply acted badly. He has ceased to be what an emperor is for. Marcus was not comfortable in the position. He said so in different ways throughout the Meditations, not as a complaint, as a fact about what the position required. The emperor cannot have ordinary friendships. Every relationship that might develop into something uncalculated is complicated by what the other person knows, that the man they are with can, by a decision, alter their lives entirely. The power does not disappear in private. It is always present as a condition of the encounter. This is the loneliness he wrote around but rarely named directly. The loneliness of a position no one else can fully enter, where the decisions are yours alone in the end, where the counsel is available but the choice is not transferable, where you can discuss the problem with every capable man you have access to and still be required, at the last, to close the door and decide in a room by yourself. He did not permit himself to complain about this. He did not permit himself the relief of self-pity. But it is present in the sixth book, in the spaces between the instructions to himself, in the persistence with which he returns to the idea that others, despite everything, despite their errors, despite the ways they fail to meet what he believed human nature required of them, exist for the sake of one another. Teach them, or bear with them. Those are the two options he names. Not judge them. Not separate yourself from them entirely. Not find a position above the difficulty. Teach them if the teaching is possible. Bear with them if it is not. Because they are what you have. Because the life of a human being is inseparable from the lives of the human beings around it. Because the man who withdraws entirely into himself in response to the failures of others has, in withdrawing, lost the thing that made him most himself. He wrote elsewhere in this book about the men who look into everything, who traverse the whole of the world in search of wisdom, who pry into the affairs of others and seek by conjecture to understand what moves in the minds of their neighbors, and find nothing. Because they are looking outward. The thing they are searching for is not found by that search. It is found by attending to what is already present in the person doing the searching. The governing faculty. The capacity to reason about what is right and act accordingly. This does not require information. It does not require the approval of the world. It does not require conditions to cooperate. It requires only that the faculty be used. He wrote, "The object of my exercise is to practice abstinence from all censure, of others and of myself. Not because censure is always wrong, because he had observed that the tendency toward censure, exercised without discipline, consumes the attention that should be directed elsewhere. Toward the work, toward the obligation, toward the person in front of you who requires something from you that is actually within your power to give." The sixth book contains a question that Marcus does not answer directly. It is not asked in so many words. It is present the way a question becomes present when a writer circles it from every angle without naming it, implied by the passages that approach it, by the gaps between them, by the things he says next to it, but not about it. The question is, what remains? He wrote about the body, plainly, without sentimentality. The body decays, not as a threat, not as a tragedy, as a fact that follows from what bodies are. The arrangement of matter that constitutes the person will disarrange. The atoms will return to what they came from and become the material of something else. He said, Camillus died. Xaezo died. Valisus died. They were as real, in their time, as anything that feels real now. And time swallowed them. Not as punishment, as the natural operation of time on everything that time contains. He included himself in this without any apparent difficulty. The emperor, too. The philosopher, too. The man who wrote carefully in the margins of his days about how to live. He is also subject to this. The body, then, is not the answer to the question of what remains. He considered the soul. Here he was careful. He did not assert the immortality of the soul with confidence. He did not offer the comfort of a certain afterlife. He said, either the soul survives the body, or it does not. Either it persists in some form after the dissolution of the material that housed it, or it disperses along with everything else. Both possibilities are stated. Neither is held above the other. What he was willing to say is this: the uncertainty changes nothing. If the soul persists, then it will carry with it what it has made of itself. The quality of the character built through the choices of a life will persist as the soul's inheritance. A soul that acted justly, that treated others as they deserved, that did not confuse what was good for the body with what was good for the person, that soul carries something into whatever follows. And if the soul does not persist, if the dissolution is complete, if nothing of the person remains after the body is gone, then the question of what follows becomes simple. Nothing follows. And therefore the quality of the action during the time the person existed is the whole of the accounting. Either way, the answer is the same. Act correctly now. Not because of reward, not because of consequence. Because the action, in the moment it is taken, is the only moment in which you are actually alive and actually capable of it. The past is complete. Nothing in it can be changed. The future has not arrived and may arrive differently than any prediction of it. The present moment is where the person exists. And in the present moment, the only question is, what is required? He wrote in the 6th book about what he called the point in eternity. Asia, he wrote, and Europe, corners of the universe. All the sea a drop. Athos a little clod. All the present time a point. He was not trying to make the reader feel small. He was trying to make the present moment feel large. A point in eternity is still a point. The sea, measured against the universe, is still a sea. A human life, measured against the span of time, is still a life. The only one this person will ever have. The only opportunity this particular existence will ever have to meet the world with what it has. Do not wait. Do not traverse everything in search of conditions that would make the action easier or more justified or more likely to be recognized. The conditions are what they are. The moment is what it is. The question is always the same question. What does this moment require? Answer it. Not perfectly. Not without error. With everything you have, in the actual circumstances that are present, without waiting for the circumstances to become more accommodating. He was writing this in the middle of a difficult life. In the years where the difficulty was no longer new enough to feel clarifying. In the ordinary persistence of a man who had understood what was required and was doing it anyway. Not because it was easy. Not because anyone was watching. Because the doing was what was left. And what was left was enough. It had always been enough. It is the whole of what the 6th book is asking you to believe.